translate it?
No need to translate. Almost everybody understands. හැම දිනාටම තෙරුවන් සරණයි. මහා සංඝරත්නයන් අවසරයි. අපේ මේ යෝගාචර රාහුල හාමුදුරුවෝ ගොඩාක් කල්ම හන වෙලා. උන්වහන්සේ 1974 කඳුබොඩටත් ඇවිල්ලා මේ කහටපිටියේ සුමතිපාල නායක හාමුදුරුවෝ සීවලි හාමුදුරුවෝ ඉන්න කාලේ ඒ උන්වහන්සේලාගෙන් භාවනා ඉගෙනගෙන භාවනා කරපු බොහොම පැරණි භාවනා කරන එක්කෙනෙක්. සහ දැන් මේ වන විට ටිකක් ලෝක ප්‍රසිද්ධ භාවනා ගුරුවරයෙක්. ඉතින් මේ උන්වහන්සේ ලංකාවට එනවා කියලා දැනගන්න ලැබුණාම මම මේ අපේ චානක මහත්තයාද කොහෙද මුලින්ම මට පණිවිඩයක් කිව්වේ ගැන. ඉතින් මේ මම උන්වහන්සේත් එක්ක සම්බන්ධතා ඇති කරගෙන මේ ආරාධනා කළා. ඉතින් අපිටත් ඇවිල්ලා ධර්ම දේශනාවක් පවත්වන්න කියලා. ඉතින් ඒ ආරාධනාවට අනුව උන්වහන්සේ වැඩම කළා. අපි කෙරෙහි කරුණාවෙන් අපිට ධර්මානුශාසනාවක් පැවැත්වීම සඳහා ඉතින් මම ආරාධනා කරන සෝබන්තේ I respectfully invite you to conduct your Dhamma talk and the program.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. All the Sangha friends here and all the lay people. So I'm happy to have this opportunity to come again to this meditation center to share some Dhamma with all of you. And let me just see the hands of those who were here at any one of the last time I was here, or one or two visits ago, or in some other place. So now people know me as the part of my name is Yogavacara Rahula. Now, you might be wondering, how I got such a name like that, because there's not many other Buddhist monks have the name containing yoga in it. And so it's kind of an interesting story, actually. That when I was first, came to India back in the 70s, as a kind of a hippie, you might say, or followed the hippie trail from Europe overland. Then when I learned, I came into contact with the Dhamma in Nepal, and then came down to Sri Lanka, where I had come to Kendo Buddha, actually to learn Vipassana meditation. But then later I got ordained at, in the meantime, actually, I'll back up a little bit. In my first meditation course in Nepal, there was a Tibetan meditation course. And I just been off 1 year of traveling like a hippie, and I don't know if you know what that's like. It's probably not the most healthiest lifestyle, but So I went to this 1 month meditation course, and like most people, we had to sit for long hours and so on, and I had lots of pain because we were just sitting on the ground on heaps of straw and so on for many hours receiving lectures. Anyway, I had lots of pain and also sickness. I had taken a fair amount of drugs along the way on the hippie trail and even before that. So my mind was a little bit had been clouded and so on. So I struggled in the first several days. But then during the breaks there were a few people doing some yoga exercise in the behind the meditation tent. And so I asked them what we were doing, and they said, well, we're doing some yoga exercise. And I asked them, why are you doing that? And they said, well, it was, it helps them to meditate. And so I said, oh, really? Maybe that can help me. So I sort of imitated what they were doing, and basically just some, the stretching exercises. And, so I tried that, and after a few days, I noticed that my meditation practice, quite well improved, and so I, kept on doing that. And then after that, on my travels, and I kept doing that, and gradually, was integrating a practice of yoga, especially doing that actually before sitting down to meditate. I'll be talking a little bit more about why that is. But anyway, coming back to the name, I guess I got distracted there. So when I got time to get ordained at Tapawani, I had gone to a yoga course actually. So before coming to Sri Lanka, or after I was here a while, I went back to, I knew I wanted to become a monk, but I wanted to learn yoga even better. So I went back to India and stayed in a yoga ashram for 6 months. And actually my teacher, Kuduvela Van Giza, who was the head monk at Gautama Tapawani in Kalapalawala at the time, he knew that. And he was going to ordain me, but I said, well, I want to go learn yoga first. So he said, okay, that's fine. Go learn yoga and come back and teach my monks. And seminaries. So anyway, so I came back. And in the yoga course, actually, the Yoga Swami, at the end of the 6-month course, he was giving Dhamma names for people. And so I told him that he wanted me to stay with him and become a yogi monk, a sort of a Hindu yoga monk as his disciple, but I told him no, I had my heart set on becoming a Buddhist monk. So he said, okay. But anyway, he came up with a Dharma name for me, of Rahula. And of course, Rahula is the way in Sanskrit that they pronounce Rahula. So, in Sri Lanka, Rahula is a common name, but it's pronounced Rahul in Hindi. So, anyway, I knew that was the son of the Buddha, so I said, okay, I'll take that name. So when I came back to get ordained, before my ordination, Van Giza said, we have to think of a monk name for you. And I said, well, I have one already. He said, well, what's that? I said, Rahula. And he said, Rahula! Yes, that'd be a good name for you. And then he said, well, we have to have another name because there are many monks with the name Rahula. And then he was thinking, oh, so we'll call you California Rahula. Because, that's where I was from. And I kind of, I was trying to, disassociate myself with, California, where I was brought up. And so I said, no, I don't particularly want to be called California. So he thought, and then he said on his own, yogavacara, that'd be a good name for me. for two accounts. One was that, I had learned the yoga and I was practicing yoga. And also because the term yogavacara was a name given for even the Buddha called them the forest-dwelling monks at the time of the Buddha. They were called yogavacaras. The one really living in the forest and really kind of dedicating them to the practice. So anyway, that's how the name stuck. My Hindu yoga teacher gave me the Buddhist name, and the Buddhist teacher gave me the name of Yogi. But as it turned out, it seemed to kind of fit how my own development and when I started sharing the Dhamma and gradually teaching some meditation retreats, I would also include some practices of the yoga, especially before meditating. Now let's come back to kind of that subject. Now, basically yoga is also a science. It's a science of the body and mind. And also the Buddhist teaching also is a science of the mind, the body and the mind, but especially the mind. And the Buddha was like a scientist, and just like or a doctor. So if somebody has some symptoms, they go to a doctor, and the doctor says, "What are your symptoms?" "Oh, I got a pain here, there's something over here." And the doctor asks you some questions, and he pokes around, has you cough. "Oh, I think you have this disease." And then having that disease, he writes a prescription. Or that's because of the disease, you eat too much sugar, or whatever, different probably things that the person has been doing. Or just cause some heredity. But anyway, so we determined the cause of the symptoms, and then wrote a prescription. And then the person takes the prescription, and they can take the medicine or not. Some people get medicine and I don't take it. Then they might get ill again. But anyway, when you get the prescription, then you might get better. And actually I had an interesting experience with this. When I was living in Unawatuna, in the early 80s, I got filariasis, which is a mosquito-borne disease. It's basically elephantitis, where your limbs swell up. And my arm started swelling up. So I went to a doctor in Colombo, and he asked me some questions. "Well, you've been down in Unawatuna, okay, they have that done." And he determined it was filariasis. And so he wrote out a prescription for antibiotics. And he told me, "Take this whole course of 2 weeks. And don't stop it, even though it seems like the symptoms are going down. Don't stop the prescription. Take the full course of antibiotics." So after about 5 days, my symptoms started going down, and I thought I was over it, and I stopped. I stopped taking the medicine. And a week later, the symptoms came back. So I had to go back to the doctor, and he kind of looked at me like a foolish person. So I was already enrolled by that time, actually. So I had to take the whole course of it. So that's just a side to highlight this fact of not stopping to take the medicine. So that's the way I treated the practice of meditation, because the Buddha himself, right? He went out of the palace, and all of a sudden we saw all these sick people, dying people, people laying in filth and covered with boils, and saw the various signs of the suffering. And he thought to himself, what's the cause of this suffering? He probably saw not only the physical suffering, but the mental suffering of people getting in arguments, fighting, yelling, cursing, uh, those kind of things that showed the mental problems that people have, to fear, worry, anxiety, and so on. So he really wanted to find the cause of that. And so, we all know that he went out and practiced meditation with the Maharishis of the day, Alara Kalama and Urka Ramaputta, was practicing formless jhanas, that reached the state of nothingness, neither perception or non-perception. He mastered those states, could stay in them for, some days and come out. Then he realized he hadn't changed very much. And said, this couldn't be enlightenment. Those teachers would tell him, this is all we got, this is the highest, Be content with that. But the Buddha wasn't content with that. So he left it. We all know that story. So he went on to the Bodhi tree and he treated his own body like a laboratory. So why should I go ask other people for the truth? They're a human being like I'm a human being. So he sat down under the Bodhi tree and made the vow. You all know that. And so he treated his body as a laboratory, and the mind, the powers of mindfulness and concentration, like a microscope. And just as if you've been in a college laboratory, doing biology, then if you turn up the power of the microscope, you start seeing, inside under the skin, and then you start seeing cells. Turn it up further, you see molecules. You turn it up further, you see atoms. You keep on, if you have an electron microscope, then you can even see the DNA, and even smash the atom. You can see electrons. Seeing how electrons are basically the source of all life. 2 or 3 electrons evolving in a certain direction, or combining with something else, make a molecule of water, H2O, right? Or other things. And then you put a lot of molecules together, and you get a cell. And then cells, put enough of them together, and then you got a fingernail, and you got a piece of hair. And eventually, all material matter. And we all know that, studying the Satipatthana Sutta and the 4 elements. That's what the 4 elements are. A lot of people, hear about the 4 elements. Apo, Tejo, Vayo, Dhatu, and they think there's some kind of thing, some actual chemistry elements or so on. But actually, they're just the way that atoms and molecules form material matter. Some of it becomes water, some of them become fluid, some of them become heat, some of them become motion, some of them actually become material. But essentially, it's all just condensed, compressed energy. And so, anyway, that's I think that's the way that the Buddha analyzed all these, and he was going deeper and deeper insight, to actually down to the actual molecular and atomic vibrations of the body, to feel how the sense of a solid body can actually dissolve. And it's just to experience a massive vibration. And with that also the thoughts. You saw that, the problem a lot of people have with meditation is they get lost in their thoughts. And why do they get lost in their thoughts? Because they don't see the thoughts coming. Let's say you're trying to practice anapanasati or some other concentration object, and then before you know it, you're lost in a train of thought, and oh my God. Then you have to bring your mind back to the breath, or whatever object you were on. And that could go on for, hundreds and thousands of times. So basically, we don't see the thoughts coming. Because thoughts originate, and this is what the Buddha saw too, I believe, that thoughts are occurring at the atomic level or within atoms and or molecules. And because our attention is not inwardly focused, then when the senses are stimulated, then we immediately start thinking about what was that sound, what was that smell, what was that body feeling. Then we get carried away and lost in the thought because the mind isn't deeply grounded in the body. And that's why, this scientific method really is the Satipatthana Sutta. And so the Buddha sat down. The first instructions are the Buddha to sit down, cross your legs, and then keep your back straight. And then, practicing Anapanasati. Now, why did the Buddha tell us to keep the back straight? Anybody have an idea?
I didn't hear the question.
Why did the Buddha, in the instructions in the Sutta, Satipatthana Sutta, the first instructions were to sit down, cross the legs, and keep your back straight. To keep the spine straight. Not to sit on one side. That's because all of the sensory vibrations of the world come through our senses and are relayed through the pasara rupa, the sense bases, and the nervous system that are located along the right and left sides of the spinal cord, where it reaches the brain, where then you have perception and then thoughts and reactions arise within the brain process. But the main hindrances in meditation are sleepiness, which is the worst hindrance. Because when you're sleepy and drowsy, your meditation is stopped dead in your tracks. So keeping the back straight allows for the life force to flow and the sensory data coming from the senses to reach the brain in optimal, time. But if you're, kind of slouching like that, you impede that flow of neurons and then wind up, half asleep or lost in your thoughts. So by keeping the back straight, it allows you to stay more alert and awake. And then, again, this is something I learned through my practice of the yoga exercise, because in the yoga ashram, the emphasis is on the spinal column. It's the most important set of bones in the whole body, is the spine. For that very reason, that it carries all of the sensory data from the world to where it's recreated in the brain's perception and reactions. And that's why there's one of the important teachings, one of the statements of the Buddha that really captivated me in the beginning. I really got interested and really wanted to find out what's going on with the mind. Was that the world, the arising of the world, the ceasing of the world, and the path leading to the ceasing of the world is right within this 5 or 6 foot long body with its nervous system, memory, and consciousness. And so basically that's saying that the world is created in the mind. Now, we may think we live on this earth. When we say world, people think it's the earth, but or the universe. But for the Buddha, that wasn't the world. The Buddha said this in different suttas. It's the world of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. The way our mind creates its idea of the world. Because if the world was just the earth, you have dogs and cats, right? That walk around, or even the dung beetles, or the ants, or the mosquitoes. They're on this earth, right? But do you think that they see the same things that you are seeing? No. They're in the animal world, right? So even though they're walking on this earth, they're in the animal world. So that in itself shows that the world is created within the mind. And you take mental patients in a mental hospital. They can be in a psychotic break for months and months, in some cases for a whole life, in a coma or in a psychotic break, and they're living in their mind. They're not on this earth. They're totally living in a mental world. So this is what the Buddha meant by that the world is created, within the mind. So anyway, coming back to this idea of so the posture is very important in the meditation, the sitting posture. And then the breathing. This is another thing I learned in the yoga ashram, about learning how to do deep, slow breathing. Now, most doctors will tell you that the average person breathes about 10 or 15 times a minute, even in rest. But in yoga, we've trained ourselves to deliberately do deep, slow breathing, and to develop what is called rhythmic breathing, and to slow the respiration rate down to just 3 or 4 times a minute. Instead of 10 or 15, you can reduce it down to just 3 or 4 times a minute. Because in one breath, you're breathing in 3 or 4 times the amount of oxygen you breathe in a shallow breath. So people have to breathe faster in order to feed all the cells of the body. This body is made up of billions of cells, and they're all hungry. They want oxygen, because they live on oxygen. If you stop breathing for a couple minutes, this body's going to drop dead. Why? Because the cells die for lack of oxygen. So in meditation, people practice, anapanasati, but they're told not to control the breath, not to regulate the breath. Now that may be true in advanced levels, or once you've developed concentration. But if you're suffering from sleepiness, if you're suffering from lots of pain, because so much pain is due to blocked energy. You get pains in your shoulders, you get pains in your hips, in your knees, because of the postures and so on. If you're not flexible, if the muscle tissue is dense, has not been, kind of stretched and so on, then it's much more difficult for the oxygen to get carried into the deepest, furthest, remotest levels of the body. Or that energy cannot, flow freely. It gets sort of blocked or dammed up and causing discomfort. So that's another thing that I learned during the yoga, by doing this kind of deep breathing. In fact, you can even gain a deep level of concentration by learning how to regulate the breath. And basically it means you breathe in, starting the breath in the lower part of the lung, and take a deep breath, raising the air up through the middle part into the upper parts of the lung and chest. So just to give just a short example, it's breathing in like just taking 4 or 6 seconds just to inhale, and then hold the breath in for 2 or 3 seconds to give enough time for all the air to get from the lungs into the bloodstream, which is then carries that out to feed the cells of the body. It's almost like electricity. And if you do, and it takes all of your effort to concentrate to do that. To deliberately take a deep, slow breath and hold the breath in, you can't think about anything else. It takes all the effort to do that. And as you let out the breath, there's a sense of relaxation as you let out the breath. And if you do that for a few minutes, or 6 or 9 times, and it changes the blood-brain chemistry in the whole body, and shifts the nervous system from the parasympathetic mode, or what is called the flight and the fight response mode that most people are in most of the time because of their stress and tension, into the parasympathetic side of the nervous system, which is the more mellow, the more relaxed vibration of the consciousness. And we did a lot of this in the yoga ashram, and I saw it was an excellent way to gain a deep level of concentration and to overcome the hindrances. For one thing, you're doing all that deep breathing, and you're also doing some stretches that send that blood out, so the body feels like almost electrified. Not really, but kind of like that. There's a lot more feeling. So you can feel these vibrations of that oxygen going in to charge up the cells of the body. And then you feel much more awake. And then it gives a pleasant feeling in the body. I think doing that kind of deep, slow breathing actually stimulates your piti and sukha, because you gain concentration. You can enter the first jhana even doing that kind of breathing. Now, some people will argue about that, but that's another issue. But anyway, in practicing that, that was the kind of revolutionary for me that helped, to really to get grounded in the body for one sense, but also to gain that concentration. And then feeling the pleasant sensations of the body, because that's what the piti and the sukha is basically. And anyway, so doing that for 10 or 15 minutes before sitting to meditate, and with some coordinated kind of stretches, it helped to combat almost all the hindrances. Just to be more awake, and there's less pain because now you've done a number of stretches and bends and turns to stretch all the joints to unblock any blocked energy, and to allow that oxygen and so on to really charge up the cells. So that's why I was really, and I saw that scientific value of that, because if you have any knowledge of science, biology, physiology, you'll know that that the body exists on oxygen, needs the oxygen, and so if you're slouching also you can't breathe deeply. So that's why even if you're trying to do deep breathing and slouching, it's going to be more difficult because you're working against that contracted rib cage. So when you're sitting in a straight posture with your head up, then when you take a deep breath, the rib cage is able to expand quite easily, and you're able to hold the air a little bit longer. Again, in order to get the benefit of, and the benefits are to be more awake and to have less pain, and also to help concentrate, because you have to concentrate while doing that. But then once you get into that, get grounded in the body, then you're able to see your thoughts more clearly. Again, the reason why we can't easily see our thoughts is because either we're half asleep, the mind isn't really alert and awake, or it's just lost in its thoughts. We don't see them coming. So thoughts are like water bubbles coming up from the bottom of a lake or a river. Water bubbles in an aquarium at home. You see, right? So you don't see the bubbles coming up. You only see, if you're standing and looking down on the surface of the lake, you only see the bubbles breaking on the top. But they originated in the bottom of the lake. So the same way in meditation, because most people are not deeply grounded and centered in the body, which is the first foundation of mindfulness. Why the Buddha made that the first foundation of mindfulness, there was a reason for that. All the four foundations of mindfulness are laid out in a specific reason, because it's a step-by-step process of using nature's way to gradually reach the mind. That the body is the doorway to the mind. And that's why the Satipatthana Sutra is laid out as first mindfulness of the body. And that gets you centered in the body. That's where the Vedanas are, right? Painful feelings, pleasant feelings, neutral feelings. You see how quickly they're just arising and changing. And you're able to develop that patience to endure them a little bit longer. And then all these feelings are what trigger off our thoughts. Almost all of our thoughts are triggered off by pleasure and pain. Because most of our thoughts are about the past and the future. And we're wanting pleasure in the future, and we're wanting to avoid pain coming back to us in the future. Almost all of our thoughts and whole life is basically revolving around that, what I call the pleasure-pain syndrome. Anyway, so that's how the Buddha used his scientific method. He uses the anapanasati. See, normally a person's mind is just floating out there in the past and future. You've all had the experience of walking somewhere, then your mind gets lost in some thought about the future, where you're going, or something else, the past, not watching where you're going and, step in a hole and twist your ankle. Or if you're preparing, your evening meal, cutting some vegetables with a knife and, thinking about some worry or fear of the past or future, cut your finger. So almost all accidents, which therefore bring pain, are due to the mind not being centered in the present moment and lost in thoughts of the past and future. And really, the original nature of our consciousness is present moment awareness. And this goes back to a little explanation about where this mind came from, at least in this life. And so mother and father produce the new little one-celled organism, but then it needs a spark of consciousness, as we understand from the Dhamma, coming from an outside source, to start the cell reproduction. And if that consciousness doesn't come, then the baby will be stillborn, or there'll be like a spontaneous miscarriage. So it needs that spark of consciousness. And then that consciousness goes into every cell of the body. So for 9 months, the newborn body, that baby has billions and billions, or say even trillions now, of cells in a body. And every one of them has awareness. That spark of that original consciousness and cell division that goes into every cell, because the cell needs awareness also to survive. And that process was going on for 9 months, basically in the present moment, inside the mother's womb. And it arose through natural wisdom. It didn't need AI, or it didn't need supercomputers, it didn't need Einstein, it didn't need, even doctors. All this marvelous, wonderful human body with its, you could say near perfect kind of systems, is developed through natural wisdom. And it was occurring in the present moment. And the body and mind were fused together. They weren't separate. The mind was in the center of every cell, the nucleus of the atom, the molecule, however you want to see it. And they're all connected in the internet, the inner internet of the nervous system. And they're all talking with each other. And so like, you get a cut and then the cells in the finger, give a shout out, and then the red blood cells start producing blood clots or whatever, how it's done. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not perfect in describing those things, but all the different systems of the body working. And then when the baby's born, the baby comes out, the mind is still in the present moment. And it doesn't even know who it is. But the parents give it a name. Little Rohan, little whatever, that's a name. And the mother's called the name for 4 or 5 months. Mother and father are playing with the baby, or, Rohan, Rohan, Rohan. But the baby never looks. But then one day, after 4 or 5 months, the baby's playing on the ground. The mother calls out, Rohan, Rohan. And the baby looks and smiles. Magic. The mother's so happy. Why is the mother so happy? Finally the child is recognizing. So for many months, the sound of Mohan or whatever was floating through the air. It didn't mean anything to the baby. But after 4 or 5 months of the brain developing and the neurons making connections, and as it starts to learn languages, and then finally it decided that this sound floating through the air refers to this thing. And now I am a somebody. So that's the beginning of the ego consciousness. That wasn't there in a developed state at the time of the baby. Of course, we all know that because of the rebirth process, ignorance came with that mind. But when it first comes, gets born into the world, that state of the ego consciousness is not active yet. And then it starts to learn language, of course. So the parents teach, that's daddy, that's mommy, that's doggy, that's kitty, And so it's now seeing objects as being things. Before it didn't. It just saw a lot of things, and all it knows was, if it's diapering or fill a poo, it would cry, fills it with, it would cry, and if it was hungry, it would cry, or something else. But his mind wasn't full of thoughts and other ideas about things. But then, as it started to experience more things, some of these things were bringing it pleasurable feelings. And then some of them were bringing it painful feelings. Like the achi. The achi comes and gives the baby its first chocolate. The baby tastes that chocolate, it's sweet. And it produces a pleasant feeling in it. So it might smile. And then the cat comes by and the baby might grab the cat's tail. And the cat would turn around and stretch. And that would get a painful feeling. So then, with every object it experiences, it's experiencing these pleasurable objects and painful objects. And naturally it doesn't care for the painful objects. It's wanting the pleasant objects. And it's starting to identify that face of the grandmother as a source of pleasure. And so it expects, or it starts wanting that face to come again. Or it's afraid of the cat, it sees it. So little by little, every object that it comes into contact with, it's experiencing it as something pleasurable or painful. And so there's a lot of neutral ones too, but primarily we create most of our karma around pleasurable feelings and painful feelings. As we develop greed and desire for pleasurable feelings, and anger or hatred or fear for what we suspect will be a painful feeling come to us. And people are just totally caught up in that. Because they start to lose the natural connection with the present moment. If the baby starts crawling, grabbing this, grabbing that, its focus, it loses that natural connection to the body that it had. And now it's focusing outward. It starts, wanting things. And so, little by little, it loses that natural connection to the present moment, which is the source is the body. Because the body has all this awareness in all of its cells. Anyway, so that's how the past and future was born in the mind. Past and future are not places outside. They are memories within the mind. And they're connected with pleasure and pain. So everything in the future is connected with pleasure. Nobody's hoping for pain in the future, I don't think. So everything we do is oriented toward wanting a pleasurable feeling, and at the same time having fear and worry and scheming, how are you going to keep painful feelings from coming again? And that's because we've lost that natural connection to the present moment happiness. The present moment is, all problems are the problems of the past and the future. Think of anything problem that you have now. That was not connected to the past or future in some way. Come on, I'll give you 5 seconds. Nobody could think of any problem that's not connected to the past or future? Right, because it probably is impossible. But when you bring your mind to the body is always in the present moment. It's our mind that's continually going between the past and the future, even creating the sense of time. It's like a clock, a pendulum clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. As long as it's going back and forth, the minute hand keeps telling time. But what happens when the tick-tock stops? Tick, tock, tick, tock. It'll stop. What happens to time? Stops. Right? So when our mind stops thinking of the past and the future, it rests in the present moment. And that's what concentration does. Whether it's anapanasati, or it's staring at a mandala, or a color casino, or whatever. And keeping your mind focused on an object, or in case of vipassana, you're letting it float from moment to moment, not sticking on any object long enough to bring in the past or future. Because when an object touches the senses, there's a microsecond gap before it reaches the brain to tell you that you've experienced something, where the perception and the sankharas are triggered off. So anyway, when you gain the concentration, you stop thinking of the past and the future, you're just focused on that object. Then the mind comes back to its natural present moment state, and resting in the present moment. And that's actually where you can start effectively practicing vipassana. Is to first gain that kind of, you weaken the 5 hindrances by concentrating, different methods. But then when the mind comes to rest, that's also one-pointedness. It's a different definition of one-pointedness. Your mind isn't absorbed in the one object, but it's resting in the present moment, which is, in Zen they call the pointless point. So it's resting in the present moment. And objects are coming and going through the awareness, but the awareness is not moving. And that's when you can effectively start practicing vipassana, because you clearly see how each of the stimulations are just arising and vanishing, and the mind is not reaching out to grab them. Or if it does, then of course you have to apply the antidotes given in the Satipatthana Sutta for dealing with hindrances and so on. So, and in that present moment awareness, there's no thoughts of the past or future, so there's naturally happiness. That's why piti and sukha arise in the first jhana when the mind has stopped moving. You know, it is developed vitalka vichara, sustained thought and attention to that object, or even the present flow of awareness, but without the mind going after it. You know. So I'm just saying this to kind of just try to see the picture of what, the dilemma or the picture of the mind, what we're up against, when we're practicing the meditation. And then how this, the deep breathing and the exercises helps to make that process more easy. I mean, meditation should be easy, because it's the most natural thing. But we made it uneasy. Our mind has become unnatural. And we've lost that natural wisdom that the body had, like the body's ability to fight off diseases, interfered with the workings of the immune system, or our digestion by consuming things that are not natural to the body, or for not getting exercise, or having breathed the polluted air. All these things have interfered with the normal functioning of the body, which contributes to probably half or more of the body problems that people have can be traced back to faulty breathing and not getting enough of the right kinds of exercise. So, again, these are things that I, you can experiment. Even when we came to, come to a meditation center sometimes, they tell you, go practice any yoga. Just do this technique, especially there's a Goenka, 10-day Vipassana courses in Goenka, and they tell you, don't do any yoga, and so on. But I used to cheat. I did it anyway. And I, got a lot of benefit from it. And even when I came here to Cambodia, I think in Simony might have told me that, or no one would do it out in public, because the idea is you shouldn't be doing it when you're practicing the technique. But I did it anyway, a little bit in my room. Just a few things, but it helped me a lot to stay more awake and alert. So anyway, this is how that. And when you go into meditation centers, often you see people meditating, kind of slouched over, and probably their mind is either half asleep or lost in thoughts. Maybe not, but probably so. And because the posture is not emphasized a lot when you go to meditation centers, talk too much about the posture. They may say sit straight, but that's about it. They don't actually tell you how to sit straight. And the reason why people can't sit straight because they haven't exercised their spine, or they haven't exercised their neck. Look, we have this big head sitting on top of the neck, right? And it weighs about 5 or 10 pounds, depending on how much hair you have, and braces and fillings you have in your teeth. And there's nothing under the chin to support. And so after a few minutes, gravity, right? It's always pulling us down to the ground. So gravity grabs his chin that doesn't have any support underneath. So the first thing you see is the chin comes down. When the chin comes down, that causes your shoulders to kind of come in, and then the spine to slope. Especially if you haven't done any types of back exercises to strengthen the muscles in the back. And because of poor postures, most of the time people, they're hardly never sitting straight. When they sit to eat, they're kind of, like this, you're driving a car, hardly ever sitting or standing still. When you actually try to do it, you realize, wow, there's a difference. So that's why doing the yoga exercises are designed to strengthen the muscles of the spinal cord, and flexing the spine in the different ways, the forward bending, backward bending, side bending, and lateral twisting, so that they become well oiled. And so the blood and life force can freely flow through them and through all the other parts of the body too. And that becomes a good meditation subject to actually feel the body. Now in the Satipatthana Sutta, after practicing Anapanasati, ideally to the level of either access concentration or the first jhana, then the Buddha said, then become aware of sitting. When you're aware of sitting, know that you're sitting. Anybody ever hear that? Read that? The sutta. When you're standing, know that you're standing. Yeah. So how do you know that you're sitting? Right now you're sitting there, right? How do you know that you're sitting? Think about it. Just close your eyes. How do you know that you're sitting? Because the mind has a memory. Your legs are stretched out like that, and your hands are like this. But, it feels a sensation. It's doing all this, of course, at a tremendous subatomic speed level, or nanosecond level, so we're not seeing that happening, but that's the way the brain operates. So it's, taking all these sensations from every part of the body, and then, okay, the body, now it's standing, or it's sitting, or it's walking, or it's moving. That's why the Buddha had us practice the mindfulness of the body. Being aware of all your movements. When you're lifting the arm, know that you're lifting. When you're lowering, know that you're lifting. Like the Mahasi Sayadaw practice, right? You label every single little movement. Lifting the foot up, swinging it forward, lowering it down. Lifting the arm, opening the fingers, closing the fingers. Eating meditation, lifting, breathing, opening. You're following every movement of the body that gets you into the present moment. And that's what I saw was the Buddha's genius in the mindfulness of the body. That it was to get you into the present moment. Now, a lot of people think it's just to become detached from the body, these piliku bhavanas and things like that. That you get us some kind of a wrong idea that, you shouldn't be preoccupied with the body, or, do anything to it. But sometimes they realize that, to me, the main benefit I got from that was it really cements the mind in the present moment. Because you can't think of it, because every thought is about lifting or doing something else with the body. Of course, once you develop that level of concentration. But it's about getting the mind into the flow of present moment awareness. Because while you're doing that, then thoughts are coming up from the cellular vibration. When you can feel those subtle vibrations in the body, okay, let's say you sit down first, and you feel your hands touching it, or you feel your buttocks pressing the seat. So that's a gross sensation. You're feeling the outer body, or even the clothing touching the skin. You're feeling the outer body. But as you keep your attention there longer, it's like you get under the skin. And then maybe you start feeling the blood pulsing in the arteries. And that's under the skin. So now you have a subtler level of awareness. You go from the outer material level now to the level of, let's say, cellular vibration. And if you keep your attention there longer, you'll feel even subtler sensations. They're hard to describe it, but you keep on feeling subtler sensations. You feel the molecular vibration. And you keep your attention there long enough, and you go down and you feel the atomic vibration. Now I'm just saying this to kind of just give a framework of how the mind is transcending from gross sensation to subtler and subtler and subtler. sensations until you see where thoughts are arising from. So when you can hold your attention at that level of the body vibrations, then you can easily, when a thought comes up, you can catch it real quick. Thinking. You let go. Or you notice, I'm getting upset. Or you're angry. You practice, the chittanussati. You practice mindfulness of feeling. So first you use the mindfulness of body to get connected to the gross physical body. Then you get under the skin of Vedanas. You're feeling the pleasant, playful, neutral feelings. And then they're triggering off thoughts. They're triggering off desire. They're triggering off, any number of thoughts. So now you're getting into chittanuppasana. And when you then reach that level, then you're at Dhammanuppasana. Then you can clearly see, then you can clearly see the 5 hindrances, which is the first object of Dhammanuppasana. And you've already trained yourself to overcome them very quickly, and you've gained that depth. And then the next is the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, volition, consciousness. That's this seeing a subtler level of all these things. The material vibration, the feeling, and all the 5 aggregates, and then even consciousness. So like that. And then the 6 senses. So all these Dhammanuppasana, it's an accumulation of having practiced all of the other sections of the Satipatthana Sutta in that order. At least, that's my experience in the way that I like to describe it. I know once you develop a deep concentration, then you don't necessarily need to always start right from the beginning, but generally for beginners and so on like that, it's like one thing leads to the other. If you're not centered in the body, you're not going to be able to see the Vedanas very clearly. And if you can't see Vedanas very clearly, you're not going to understand what's triggering off your thoughts and so on. So I'm just saying this to say that the practice of the yoga helps to get deeply, to get that pleasant feeling in the body. Basically, it's the level of those subtle vibrations are what really are piti and sukha, because the mind is in the present moment, and it's the present moment that is really causing the mind to be happy. Because when the mind's in the present moment, there's nothing to think about. There's no past. There's nothing to worry about. There's no fear. There's no desire. There's no aversion, because all those things are connected to the past and the future. When you're holding your mind at that deep level of what I like to call cellular vibration, or even at atomic level of vibration, then your thoughts just are like a water bubbles, and the mind doesn't latch onto them. And that's how you can keep developing your practice. So anyway, basically that's kind of just what I wanted to share with you, and to emphasize that meditation is already difficult for most people. But why do they make it that much more harder for themselves? A lot of people, they go out and rush around the daytime. They come, I gotta meditate. Then you come in and sit down, a few minutes later, because they haven't prepped themselves. And so doing stuff like when you first get up in the morning, to do a few yoga stretches to get the energy flowing, and to do some deep, slow breathing, so you charge up the cells with oxygen. Also, it helps you to concentrate. Then when you sit to meditate, it's like you're halfway there already, because it's a kind of meditation in itself, in terms of keeping your body focused on the breathing and also the body sensations that are being generated through the combination of the breathing with the movements. And wherever I, kind of instruct people in that or have them do that, most people find it, effective and helpful, and that's why I continue to do that. And that's why if people are interested in going through a little session of that, I'd be happy to, to do that. Or if anybody, first of all, if anybody has any questions about anything that I might have been talking about, feel free to ask the question. Yes.
Ask a question roughly. Question is,
Speak a little bit louder so others can hear you.
as I got from your talk, we have these problems in the body where if there is a tightness, if there's a like a knot or something like that kind of thing, that affects the flow, whereas eventually it affects our mental flow as well. Can we say that the tightnesses in our mental flow also affects our body as well?
Yes, it's a two-way street. The mind affects the body, and the body affects the mind. So even if a person wasn't to practice, let's say, yoga and so on, if they were able to develop concentration and to weaken the hindrances just through the power of the concentration, that would also relax the body. But
Elaborate.
because that's the natural connection between the body and the mind. Because again, they're not really separated. And so the mind is, usually in an agitated state. Most people, with worries and fears and just in the future running around. And so it's in an agitated state. And that affects the cells of the body because the mind is in each cell. So if the awareness which is in every cell is agitated, then naturally that's going to affect the body that's around it. And so by relaxing the mind, the body can relax. But it might be easier to relax the body first than the mind, because the mind's not easy to catch hold of. So that's why things like yoga are done before meditation, because it's easier. But while you're doing that, you're also concentrated. You do it with a state of mindfulness and concentration, holding a position, trying to regulate the movements and so on. So that also creates a calming vibration in the nervous system that helps the mind get concentrated. Now, not all pains necessarily are going to be dispersed by doing deep, slow breathing. People have chronic conditions and things that, pains that originate in the molecular level and so on. So, but we're talking about the general run-of-the-mill discomforts and aches and pains that are not really like serious pains. Most people have very little pain tolerance. And so, like you've been sitting for a while, so you might have already kind of moved once or twice like that, or done something else. All of that is about trying to release discomfort feelings. Now, if you're mindful, then you can see it, or even with Madhura, you can see there with Madhura, people this and that, because of unpleasant feelings. And so when you do that, the mind gets agitated. And so the mind, the body is tensing up, the mind is tense. But if you just, you hear that sound of Madhura, okay, just hearing. Use the Masi technique. Just hearing. Don't turn it into a mosquito. Once you've allowed that sound vibration to trigger off sanya, perception, then the idea of a mosquito, then you're going to think mosquitoes have malaria, dengue, and then that's going to create fear and worry. It's a chain reaction. But it happens in a nanosecond. And so if we're not deeply relaxed, when you relax and you're able to notice that unpleasant feeling, that's not going to kill you. It's okay. And you can learn to endure it a little bit longer. And the example I give, let's say there was a maduro mosquito. And you hear the sound, bzzz, immediately the ears perk up. There's worry. And then it lands on you. And then it starts to drill. And then fireworks go off in your brain. Worries and this and that. And then, should I remove it or should I not? My mother would want me to remove it. And, this person says that. Mine's going through all this vichikicha, doubts. And but then finally you say, okay, I'm gonna shoo it away. I won't kill it, but I'll shoo it away. So slowly, practicing mahas, lifting, moving. And you get up just about the time where you're gonna, and then the mosquito flies away by itself. And then, you wasted all your energy. You didn't need to go through all that because of anicca. So this is where anicca fits in. Everything's always true. Give it time, patience. So if you'd have waited 2 seconds longer, the mosquito would have flown away before you wasted energy raising up your hand. And you can apply that same kind of logic to so many other things, even pains in the body. There's all kinds of pains that arise in the body. Sometimes they're due to our mind, because tension and fear can cause pains in the muscle tissue and so on too. And it appears like things are happening. How many of you in your meditations have felt like there were ants crawling on you? And you open your eyes, but there was no ants. See, because it's occurring under the skin, or it's happening in your mind. The mind can actually create the pain. So it's very tricky with sensation. Mara is always out to try to fool us, and they're doing things that are preventing us from getting into deep meditation. So it's causing us to always want to fidget, moving around, thinking that all of these sensations have to be removed. They don't always have to be removed. You get sensation in your eyes and ears, virtually everywhere. They're just sensations. You just let them be. They're going to change and vanish. Even strong ones. After, give it a few minutes. And you can develop patience. And then you reach a much deeper level of calm. Any other questions? Yes.
Now, if we get in animal cells, right? Because you mentioned that cell division is activated by consciousness. Then what about plant cells?
Well, what?
What about plant cells? Because like animal cells, cell division got activated by consciousness.
With the original consciousness.
Yeah.
When the cell divides, the consciousness will go with the material elements that are causing your fingernail to grow longer, or your hair to grow out. I mean, again, they're not separate things. It's hard to explain it in words. But in plants, there's books written about plants that they also have a kind of an awareness. But, Buddha kind of drew a line with the sentient, life. Because if you start saying plants have consciousness and then you're going to eat with it, it's causing a lot of problems. So the Buddha was, follow the middle path, avoiding the extreme. So he drew the line at sentient, even down to the insect world. And, we're also trying to be happy, right? Mosquito's just trying to be happy.
Yeah.
That's its karma, it's on blood. And that's, when I first came to Asia, as a monk and getting bitten by mosquitoes, then I realized, my gosh, when I was young, how much I ate a lot of meat, I used to like to eat, steaks and burgers, when I was young, a teenager and all that. Took a lot of blood from that, and so I said, okay, now it's payback, take my blood. And so just, kind of tolerate it, just relax in the metta. And then usually those itches and so on from it don't last very long.
May I have your permission to ask one question? You repeatedly mentioned that keeping the mind or the mind object on the present moment is really the most important thing in gaining concentration.
Well, it's the development.
Yes, I agree with that. But with the knowledge of Dhamma, and sometimes people talk about the momentariness of this present moment. So then there are various technical issues that are coming up when you try to explain it using Abhidhamma principles. So therefore, we have been explaining it as the immediate past. Because when you say rising and falling of your stomach, and if you are using that as the meditation object, so when the rising takes place, we sense that and we know that, and then we contemplate it as rising. Similarly, when it is falling, the stomach is falling, so really it has fallen, and when after the falling has begun, then only we recognize that and contemplate it as the falling. So similarly, even mental objects.
They're in the past.
Always we take the immediate past, just before you start contemplating what happened. So that is really the limitation when you say present moment, because present moment is not defined as that particular moment itself, because that's not practically possible according to the Abhidharma explanations.
Well, you don't have to, rely on the Abhidhamma. The sutras that we're going to talk about. So, there's of course a lot of debate around these things, but we're talking about a practical thing. When I'm mentioning the present moment, as I have been doing,
no, what you said
it's about I'm not thinking about the past and the future through these other things. It's just what's occurring in the present moment, and the mind has to make sense out of things.
Yes.
So, when you're aware of breathing in at that moment, you're not aware of breathing out or something else. But that process is happening at billions of times in a blink of an eye. The nervous system and neurons are firing in the brain and nervous system at billions of times in a split second, as any neuroscientist is going to tell you that. And so of course we don't see it that fast, but in developing this moment-to-moment attention, it's just to keep us from thinking about letting the mind get carried away in that object. That the in-breath is coming, and then the out-breath starts. So you don't follow the in-breath or something else. You follow the next thing, which is in the present, and then the next thing. You let go of each thing as it ceases. The mind lets go of it and is there with the arising of any of the other senses. If you're practicing that full-blown kind of sixth sense door awareness. And that leads to concentration, because the mind being in the present moment, concentration is defined as the 5 hindrances being suppressed. And is anybody who's been practicing the Mahasi system knows that when you have to be mindful of the hindrance to overcome it, right? So you have to be aware of sleeping. You have to identify it. If you don't, you're just going to keep sitting there for a long time. Or you're aware of pain. It helps you to realize, oh yes, and okay, relax. And you can add some mental commentary to it to help you to let go of it. That's what investigation of Dhamma is, yogavacara. and also the Chintamaya Panya. So you use a bit of thinking in order for the mind to let go, and then that is naturally stops by itself once you reach when the mind is flowing from moment to moment. Then you get the piti and the sukha coming up with it, and that goes to many levels, of course. But basically, so the mind, we say that the mind is in the flow of the present moment. And even when you're doing exercise, so you go from one stretch into another, not allowing your mind to be wandering thoughts. And you keep going from one stretch into another. So it's a practice of mindfulness even when you're doing that. And then doing deep, slow breathing. But it gives the mind something to do, and then the mind thinks it's actually accomplishing something. Like you're getting two benefits. Reflection of the body, which is good for health, plus you're using it as a means to stay in the present moment that you might not get if you're just sitting stone still and just trying to, do it without previously doing it. So, it's just an aid for helping.
Actually, the second question is about, you mentioned about the meditator being able to see for himself the elements, aggregates, and even ayatana. That is something in the Mahasi method. You don't try to impose it from outside, but it is something which automatically comes with the development of concentration and wisdom. Am I right in that? I see that.
Yes, but it may not come in the very beginning. We're talking about the Mahasi method. Actually, I follow Satipatthana Sutta. And even the Mahasi method has come from Satipatthana Sutta. It's just been, condensed a little bit. And the same with even the Goenka method. It comes from the Satipatthana Sutta. But these techniques have been cultivated to kind of make it easier for lay people to get a technique. Now, if you go through the whole Satipatthana Sutta, it takes a long time. Reading and understanding it. But you read, in the Satipatthana Sutta, it has, when greed arises, know how does greed arise. Know how long does it stay there. Know when it ceases. So how did it come? That requires thinking. Because you've cultivated these habits, that's why greed is arising. And when you restrain yourself, that's how gradually greed can stop. Or other pain. Or how does sound arise? Well, because there's an ear, there's an object, and then there's attention. You're hearing something. And so this kind of intellectual understanding can be used in the beginning, but then it becomes intuitive knowledge. You see, there's three types of wisdom. One is intellectual wisdom, Sutramaya Panya. One is the Chintamaya Panya. That means contemplating, using your thinking, contemplating, which that is what in the Satipatthana Sutta, when you're examining things, that's what you're using. But then later, once that becomes intuitive knowledge, then you into the Bhavanamaya Panya, which becomes the wordless, the deep insights that come, the attainment of even Magga and Pala and so on. But it's a deep insight that, oh, wow, that's what it means. That's what it means. It's kind of aha moments. But a little bit like it. But you can help that along by developing this type of, Chintamaya Panya. But yeah, when the mind enters the flow of present moment awareness, and then that becomes natural wisdom. Then you understand everything. And you understand even how the sense of self arises. The sense of self and I is made up of simply the past, future, pleasure, and pain. Because the past and the future and pleasure are synonymous, pain in the past is synonymous. Although you can think of some pleasure in the past and want it to come again in the future. But anyway, so basically the sense of I is like an ice cube floating in water. Because the baby didn't have the sense of self there when it came out of the womb. It started to get that when it started to think of the past and the future, and then learning objects, and then the sense of, oh, this body is mine, and then, because of attachment and greed, this is mine, and so on. You see the evolution of how the mind has got caught up in that. And so you work at opposite. The Satipatthana Sutra is simply an inverse evolution. Mind is evolved out into the world. And then so the Buddha had us retrace our steps. First, anapanasati. Your mind is lost in the outer world. Okay, then it touches the nose. You found the body. You found the outer body. Then you become aware of sitting, standing. Feel the hands pressing, the clothes touching your feet, whatever. So now you found the body. Then you get under the skin. You feel the heart beating. You feel the blood pulsing in the veins. You feel other little waves of sensations and so on. And so now you're getting deeper inside, as I've already mentioned, with the Vedana and then Chitta and then consciousness. Consciousness is the last thing. That's why you can let go of physical form. You can let go of the Vedana. You can let go of the thoughts, the urges. But then the last thing that is left, the feeling in the body might have dissolved. And then you feel that deep stillness, and then, I'm getting close now. The sense of I still there. That's the consciousness. It's a sense of the ego consciousness. And that's the last frontier. And so it's like that ice cube melting in water. So the ice cube thinks it's different than water, right? When you look at it, well, that's an ice cube. And that's water. People are making a difference. But an ice cube is just frozen water. So you see that happening in your mind as you stop letting go of trying to scratch this and look at that and squirm around, all that thinking and so on, becomes concentrated. All that energy is withdrawn from the periphery. It becomes concentration. And so the self can't exist because it exists on the memories of the past and the future. And its sense of self depends on the past and the future. So when the mind is no longer recreating that, it starts melting like the ice cube. And then the ice cube gets smaller, smaller. You can actually see that happening in meditation as you go deeper and deeper from one jhana to another and another, or even from the levels of insight. Until that last little trace of self is just somewhere in the far background. There's this little sense of I still hanging around. But then and that's the moment the mind can enter the stream. And you see that dissolution of the self, how was it created by the mind? It's not something real, and we go on recreating every time we react or try to get pleasure or remove pain, we increase the sense of self. So by learning how to detach from the greed and become more simple and stuff like, with the monks, having the, Vinaya and all that, and then developing patience, enduring pain. That's all about helping to weaken that sense of self. But that's the last thing that has to dissolve. But that's the hardest, because that's what people cling to. Sakkaya Ditthi. Thinking that you're the meditator. Even that has to be let go. The meditation will happen by itself at that point. It's on automatic pilot by that time. But you still have to watch it, because Mara is always hanging out in the background, wanting to create some delusion But because of the panya, I can see that what Mara is doing when you keep letting it. Anyway, I'm sorry if I went on too long. Any last question? Yes.
So like since we are following the path of Dhamma and yet our goal is to find liberation, when we look at the yogic path, especially the asana, the postural path, if you look at the new age yogis like Iyengar or Madhava Joyce or Shivananda, these practices can go quite intensely as well. Like first stage, second stage, third stage, fourth stage. But making a meditation a priority, how far would one take the yogic postural practices as well so it actually benefits us, so we don't get caught into the other side?
Until you can sit straight enough and alert enough to overcome the 5 hindrances.
And that's where you stop there.
But you don't necessarily stop. You have to keep going, because even lifting weights, if you stop for a week, the muscles are going to get flabby. So meditation, mindfulness in the body is also a muscle. Being awake, being alert, like a muscle. If you don't practice meditation for several days or a week, you'll see that your mindfulness, slips. And that's why it's something we have to keep doing, as much as possible to keep that strength and that habit. Now, with the yoga, the way it's taught in the West, the original meaning of yoga is actually meditation. It means to yoke, bring the dualities together into oneness. So bring the past and the future into the present moment. Bring the pleasure and pain, dissolve them so they're just neither pleasant nor painful. And the self and others. Those are the 3 main dualities of life. And then actually, this is very interesting. Okay, meditation is an English word, right? And what normally is it translated from? Who translated these first books and called it whatever it is meditation? Who created that word? Usually they'll say bhavan, right? Okay, you say metta bhavan, metta meditation, samatha bhavan, calming meditation, vipassana bhavan, insight meditation. So, taking that word, M-E-D-I, that's the prefix. What other words start with M-E-D-I? Medicine, media, a medium, a mediator. What do all those words have in common? They're a bridge between the opposites. So if you're sick, you take medicine, is between sickness and health. So if you're sick, you take medicine. Right? Hopefully you'll go from sickness to health. A mediator sits between 2 arguing groups of people to try to resolve their differences. And the media tries to flesh out the truth between all kinds of opposing views. And a medium tries to communicate with devas and human beings. So, what does meditation do? What is meditation sitting in the middle? I've already been talking about it. The past and the future. When you meditate, you choose a concentration object. You keep it there, just feeling the touch of air here, or just being aware of rising, falling. And if you can do that, long enough, the mind will come to that one point in the middle. And also between pleasure and pain. So, past and the future, pleasure and pain. And then the last one, the last duality. Me and you. Self and the others. Because the mind is always going between ourselves, judging ourselves, judging others, going back and forth. And that's what the mind is constantly doing. Creating these dualities, creating these, strengthening the delusion, the greed, hatred, and delusion. So, in meditation, first you let go of the past and the future by concentrating on the whatever object you're using, or vipassana, just noting and so on. And as you gain the concentration, the pains will kind of go away because you're not thinking about the body so much anymore. And as the mind gets closer and closer, more and more in the present moment without wandering thoughts, the pains in the body won't be so obvious. Because our mind grabs the pain and amplifies it, like an amplifier. But when the mind stops doing that, then you can have a pain and then realize you think it's gone away for 5 or 10 minutes and it might come back again. So, and then the last is the self and others. Pleasure, past and future, the easiest ones to overcome. Pleasure and pain comes next, and then finally, the most difficult one is letting go of self and others. And that's meditation. That's the way I like to define it. Because again, what does the word mean? M-E-D-I. And people don't stop to reflect on it. But anyway. Okay. Anybody want to try a little deep breathing? See what that's all about? Okay, could we go out there where there's a little bit more room to have, maybe it's where the air is a little bit more fresh and moving, in a place to maybe move our arms a little bit without hitting somebody. So we're going to take a few minutes break. If you need to use the restroom, do that now so it wouldn't interfere. Because after doing, maybe about 10 minutes of some breathing and stretching, we'll sit down and do a sitting meditation, using that as a kind of a basis.
දැන් හරිය ඕන වෙලාවකට පැතුරු ටික දාලා වාඩි වෙනවා. පැතුරු ඕනේ නැහැ.
Yeah, we're not going to be going down to the ground. We're just going to do all this in a standing position, so we probably don't really need a yoga mat. Bag of air. It's got different compartments, lower lobes, middle lobes, upper lobes, and they're there for a reason, as a protective mechanism for the body, because if you got stabbed or part of your lung was damaged, you still can breathe in other parts of the lung, as well as breathing in those parts of the lungs affects the circulation in different parts of the body. But generally, so starting the breath in the lower lung, there's the diaphragm muscle that stretches across the bottom of the rib cage. That's the main organ in breathing. Most people have weak diaphragms who don't consciously breathe. But as you breathe in, the diaphragm goes down, creating a vacuum in the lungs, and the air is taken in. Normally it goes down to the bottom first because of gravity. And then if the breath is deep enough, then it moves to the middle or upper lobes. And most people don't breathe deep enough to get the air to the upper lobes. So we're going to try to be slow with that. So if you place your hands, kind of suck your stomach in and feel the bottom of your rib cage. And put the hands kind of just underneath that, right over your navel. And then we want to try to take about 3 seconds to slowly breathe in. That may be difficult because normally people are not used to breathing in slowly. But anyway, try that. Just focusing on the lower lobes. So breathe in and push your stomach out and down as you're breathing in. Hold the breath in for 2 seconds. And the out breath, gently pull or suck the stomach in and out to get all the air out. Again, in breath, push the stomach out and down. Hold the breath. Out breath, pull the stomach in and up. Get all the air out. Do that a couple more times. In breath. With that expanding and contracting in the lower part of your lungs. If you think you have the control over that, put your hands at the sides and do it just with your concentration. The same thing. In breath, push the stomach out and down. Out breath, pull the stomach in and up. Out breath, just relax. And just feel the standing body. Feel your feet pressing the floor. Just remind yourself of standing, present moment of the body. And now we're going to move our attention to the middle chest. So raise the hands up to about this point. And actually, or you can put the hands like this. Actually, for middle chest breathing, it's for rib cage that expands and contracts. So when you breathe in, you'll feel an outward movement of the rib cage while you're breathing in. And on the out breath, the rib cage comes back in. It's like an accordion. Familiar with an accordion breathing like that. So try to feel that. Raise the hands up a little bit higher. So you slowly breathe in, feel that expansion. Hold the air in for 2 seconds. On the out breath, feel that inward contraction of the rib cage. On the out breath, put the arms down at the sides and do it 2 times just with concentration. Concentrate in the center of your chest. Do that outward expansion of the middle chest. Out breath, just relax. Feeling your body, remind yourself standing. Your feet pressing the floor. Your clothing touching the skin on different places. Pleasant moment of the body. Breathing, standing. How many of you feel the difference too difficult to do. But getting air into the upper part of the lungs may be more difficult because normally people don't breathe there at all. And they become shrunk because of non-use. So you have to raise your hands, put them up right across your collarbone, because the top of the lung is pointed like that, and it goes up to the collarbone when you breathe in. Keep the elbows lifted up, and don't breathe in. Try to flatten your fingers right across the whole upper part of the chest. Close your eyes, it's just a short distance from your nose to the upper chest. Breathe in, try to feel lift in the upper chest. Hold the air in 2 seconds. And breathe out, feel that upper chest contracting down. In breath. Out. In. Out. In. On the up breath, put the hands down at the sides, let the breath out. Try to do it without using your hand, same upper chest. Imagine you're breathing the air in from the base of your neck. Out breath, just relax, feeling the body, feel the effects of all that breathing, body, your mind. Feel some kind of different vibration. Just remember standing, and let the mind get carried away in other thoughts. Standing, breathing, letting your thoughts come and go in the back of the mind. Standing, breathing, body in front of the awareness. Looking into a full-length mirror. How many of you think you could feel that breathing in the upper chest? Raise your hand. Here. That was the easy part. So now what we want to do is actually take a 3-part breath. And what that means is you try to divide the breath into 3 parts. Start the first part of the breath breathing in the lower part. The second count into the middle part. And last bit into the upper part. So you use the hands, move the hands like I was doing in the beginning to help kind of get the hang of it. So place the hands here. So don't breathe too fast in the beginning and you won't have enough energy to make it up to the top. And I'm going to do the counting for you. So I'm going to count to 3 slowly and watch my hands as I move them from the bottom to the middle and top, and just try to follow that. And then after reaching the top, we're going to hold the breath in, and then on the out breath, feel the air going out all the way. So go ahead and begin. In 1, 2, 3, hold the breath. Out breath, 1, side, but you do it on your own. Divide the breath into 3 parts. For yourself. Keep the air up into the top of the lungs. Hold it. Slowly breathe out. Feel the last bit of air go out and out. Just develop this mindfulness while you're doing that breathing. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Hold the breath. Breathing out, standing here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, standing here and now. Breathing in, feeling the whole body. Breathing out, feeling the whole body. Do that a few more times on your own. Now we're going to combine that breathing with a couple of simple stretches. I'm going to lead you through it. Just try to follow that as best you can. We do the movement while breathing in, holding that position for 2 seconds, returning to the starting point on the out breath, pausing a second, and then repeating each one 2 times. The whole time, try to feel the body sensations that are being generated in different parts of the body while you're doing that. Okay, so we'll try that. On the in breath, raise the arms over the head. Interlock the fingers, turn the palms up, straighten the arms, stretch your head back, straight. Release the fingers, the out breath, arms back to the side. Feel the air go out as the arms come. Again, in breath. Straight. Out breath. In. Close the eyes, relax, keep feeling the body, especially the hands and fingers, for the increased sensation, or any other sensation. Just remember standing, with the clothing touching the skin. Sounds coming and going in the background, just hearing here. Letting go of your thought. Standing, breathing, standing, breathing. Now the next exercise, on the in breath, we lift up on the balls of the feet while raising the arms up over the head in this way, facing the hands toward each other and stretch. And the out breath, come back down. eyes, keep feeling the body, give the mind time to get lost in thought. Body's always here and now. Just beneath your nose. Feel those activated life force vibrations. Releasing the extra pain, itchy feeling. And the touch of the air against the skin. Standing, breathing, standing, hearing, feeling, standing, breathing, present moment, moment per moment. Breath by breath, moment by moment. And next we'll do side bending. On the next in-breath, raise both arms up and keep your fingers and arms straight close to your hip. On the out-breath, bend over your right side as far as you comfortably can. Feel the stretch in the side. In-breath, lift up. On the other side, out-breath. In. Once more to each side. And the out breath, lower the arms, close the eyes, feeling the body, especially your hands and fingers. There's lots of sensations, present moment sensation. All those sensations you may be feeling, basically are just the vibrations. Electrons, atoms, molecules, cells. That's all this body is. It's compressed vibrations, energy. Now we're going to do one last simple exercise, turning the head from right to left. For an in-breath, turn your head to the right, as far as you comfortably can. If you have a stiff neck, be careful. And look over your right shoulder. And on the out breath, turn the head all the way back to the left. Concentrate into the neck vertebrae, feeling the loosening up. Look over the left shoulder. In breath, back to the right. Out breath. In right. Out breath. The in breath, let the head stop in the middle, with the eyes closed, keep feeling the whole body. Just try to feel your eyes resting in the eye socket. Let it point down the eyes, try to feel the outline of the whole body, sense of the head on top, arms at the side, clothing touching the skin, feet pressing the floor. The outline of the body, sanya, perception, created in the mind from all the different sensations. Standing, breathing out, spend, breathing in, letting go of the past and future, breathing out, standing here and now. Breathing body is the anchor to the present moment. We lose that connection with the breathing body, present moment. The mind gets easily carried away. Thoughts and words of the past and the future. Sinking whirlpools, dark emotion. Constant awareness of the breathing body, the mind will float, floating from moment to moment. Out of the awareness. Bring this practice to the end, although it should never end. Awareness never needs to end because the body is always with us. We carry this body around with us 24/7, right? 365. The last number, we don't know yet. How many years we've been. But we have to carry the body around with us 24/7. 360. Why not use it for the best possible purpose? Is that anchor to the present moment? Is that doorway to consciousness? Okay? Which one of us? How many of you felt some effect of doing that breathing and the stretching in terms of feeling a lot more sensation and helping you to stay centered in the present moment? It's a very simple thing. It's the most simple and naturalist thing. Is what people are looking for. Anyway, wish you all the best. Sadhu, sadhu. Sahidiyo ajantu saparogo yasatu mate bhavatvantarayo sukhidigayiko bhava bhavatu sarvamangalam rakantu sarvadevata sarvabuddhanubhavena sarvadhammanubhavena sarvasanganubhavena sadaswati bhavantu te.
So thank you very much, Bhante. Much merits to you. It's a wonderful talk and wonderful meditation session. Your talk itself is a meditation. By listening to the talk itself is enough to calm down the mind. And this new way of practicing Kayanupassana also helpful for us. So we wish you all the best, and may you be healthy, and may you be happy, and may you live long to teach others meditation and spiritual path. And may you attain supreme bliss of Nibbana as soon as possible. And may all your spiritual wishes come true.
You see him out there. Now there's just one more thing I want to mention. There's something called an M&M. Because a lot of people cannot practice longer daily meditation. Their mind makes up all kinds of excuses and find themselves not being able to sit for longer in the morning or evening. So there's something called an M&M, which is a minute meditation. And it's like a vitamin supplement, but this is a meditation supplement for people that keep, not able to keep up the daily practice. And so it's a specific practice where you train yourself to stop once an hour for 1 minute. Like just whatever you do, let's say you just finished washing your dishes, before you start to rush off, do something else, just stop, freeze in your tracks. Just take a deep, slow breath. You feel that expansion in the chest, so wonderful. Hold it in for a few moments. And slowly breathe out. And you do that 2 or 3 times, that's already 1 minute. And while you're doing that, you can't really think of anything else. And it brings the whole Dhamma back into perspective. And it brings you back to the present moment. Just breathing in, standing, breathing out, standing. That's the ground zero. You all heard about ground zero or something, right? Now this is the ground zero of the dukkha. Because if you lose that present moment awareness, dukkha arises immediately. Worries, fears, agitation, all kind of things like that. So this is something I want to leave with you. You can program your watch or beeper to beep. Oh yes, stop it. Everything comes together, and then start doing what you're going to do. But you train yourself to try to do it once an hour, because doing it just once a day is not going to do much. But if you do it every hour, especially if you have to go in to talk to somebody, do it then, when there might be some tension arise, whatever. So prep yourself, take a few deep breaths. That's a miracle pill. That deep, slow breathing is a miracle pill. Out of all the things I learned in Asia and yoga, that was more than standing on your head and twisting your body into pretzel shapes. That was the most important thing that I learned. Because you can practice anywhere, anytime. It's always there. And it's good. Okay.
ගිලම්පසක් ක්ලාස් කරලා තියෙනවා හැමෝම ගිලම්පස. We have a drink also. You can enjoy it. අපි මේ පිරිකර වගේ කුත් ක්ලාස් කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒකත් පූජා කරමු මහත්තයා.